The morning sun peeked over the towering peaks of Glacier National Park, painting the sky in hues of amber and pink. I parked my car at Logan Pass, a small flutter of excitement stirring in my chest. The Highline Trail stretched ahead, a narrow ribbon cutting through the rugged terrain, promising both challenge and breathtaking beauty. I checked my gear one last time: water bottle, trail map, first aid kit, and, most importantly, my bear spray. My dad's voice echoed in my mind. "Always respect the wild, Sarah. You're just a visitor in their home." "Here we go," I murmured to myself, adjusting the straps on my backpack. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, fresh and invigorating. The first few steps onto the trail were like stepping into another world. Towering cliffs rose to my left, while to my right, the landscape dropped steeply into a valley, where a river snaked through a forest of evergreens. The path was narrow, barely wide enough for two people to pass. My boots crunched softly on the gravel as I moved forward, every sound amplified in the stillness. 15 minutes into the hike, I paused to take in the view. A hawk soared high, above, its cry sharp and piercing. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture, though I knew no photo could truly capture the grandeur of this place. "Good morning," a cheerful voice startled me, and I turned to see a middle-aged couple approaching from behind. They were decked out in matching hiking gear, their faces glowing with the kind of contentment that comes from a lifetime of shared adventures. "Morning," I replied, stepping aside to let them pass. "First time on the Highline?" "The man asked, his voice friendly. "Yeah," I admitted. "Always wanted to try it." "You'll love it," the woman said, her eyes crinkling as she smiled. "Just keep an eye out for wildlife. We saw some bighorn sheep near the overlook yesterday." "And bears," the man added with a knowing chuckle. "Make plenty of noise as you go." "Will do," I said, patting the bear spray clipped to my belt. They waved and continued down the trail, their laughter fading into the distance. I stood for a moment, listening to the faint rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird. Then I resumed my hike, my senses attuned to every detail around me. The trail began to climb, the incline gentle but steady. Beads of sweat formed on my brow as I navigated the narrow path, occasionally brushing against the rocky cliffside. To my left, tufts of wildflowers clung stubbornly to cracks in the rock, their delicate petals a splash of color against the gray stone. Half an hour later, I reached a small clearing where the trail widened slightly, offering a panoramic view of the valley below. I set my pack down and pulled out a granola bar, savoring the moment. "Not bad for a solo hike," I said aloud, my voice barely more than a whisper. As I rested, I thought about why I loved hiking alone. It wasn't just the freedom to set my own pace or the solitude. It was the chance to feel small, to be reminded that there was a world far bigger than myself. Out here, the worries and stresses of everyday life faded, replaced by a sense of wonder and humility. After a quick water break, I shouldered my pack and pressed on. The trail began to level out, skirting a sheer drop-off that made my stomach flip if I glanced down for too long. I stuck close to the cliffside, focusing on each step. About an hour into the hike, I spotted a cluster of rocks up ahead, perfectly placed for another short break. As I approached, something caught my eye, a patch of flattened grass near the edge of the trail. I knelt down to inspect it, noticing a faint but distinct impression in the dirt: bear tracks. My pulse quickened as I stood, scanning my surroundings. The tracks weren't fresh, but they were recent enough to remind me of the park's warning signs. Bears frequent this area. "All right, Sarah," I muttered. "Stay calm, stay alert." I reached for the whistle around my neck and blew a few short bursts, the sharp sound echoing off the cliffs. My dad had drilled this into me. "Make noise, let the bears know you're coming." I felt a bit silly doing it, but I'd rather be cautious than sorry. As I continued down the trail, I made a point of talking to myself, filling the silence with my own voice. "Beautiful day, isn't it? Just you, the mountains, and the occasional bear track." I laughed nervously, glancing over my shoulder. The trail curved sharply, and I slowed my pace, peering around the bend before committing to each step. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every rustle in the underbrush made my heart skip. But as the minutes passed, my nerves began to settle. Still, the Highline Trail had my full respect. Ahead, the sun climbed higher, its warmth cutting through the cool morning air. My spirits lifted as I spotted a small waterfall cascading down the rocks, its gentle trickle a soothing sound against the backdrop of silence. Almost to the overlook, I told myself, feeling a surge of accomplishment. Little did I know the most harrowing part of my journey was yet to come. The narrow path wound its way along the cliffside, the sheer drop to my right, making my stomach churn if I lingered on it too long. The air was crisp and carried the faint scent of pine, but beneath the serenity, a low hum of unease buzzed in my mind. The bear tracks I'd seen earlier replayed in my thoughts, a reminder of just how close I was to nature's raw, untamed force. "Nothing to worry about," I said aloud, my voice breaking the heavy silence. "Just you and the trail, Sarah. Stay focused." Ahead, the trail dipped slightly, the shadows from the towering cliffs shifting as the sun climbed higher in the sky. I kept my pace steady, my boots crunching against the gravel. Every so often I reached for my whistle and blew a sharp burst, the sound echoing off the jagged rock walls. The silence between the echoes was deafening. I rounded a bend and paused, catching sight of fresh claw marks raked across the bark of a tree just off the trail. The grooves were deep, uneven, and unmistakably recent. My throat tightened as I stepped closer to inspect them. "Looks like someone's been busy," I muttered, forcing a weak smile as I snapped a photo with my phone. The claw marks were a stark reminder of how easily a bear could shred through the toughest material or the softest flesh. I glanced over my shoulder, my hand instinctively brushing against the canister of bear spray clipped to my belt. A rustle in the underbrush nearby made me freeze. My pulse quickened as I strained to listen, but the sound faded as quickly as it had come. I told myself it was just the wind or a squirrel darting through the bushes, but the hairs on the back of my neck remained on edge. The trail grew narrower as I continued, and the trees thinned, revealing a sprawling meadow. Patches of wildflowers painted the grass in vibrant shades of purple and yellow. It was beautiful, almost surreal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I glanced down and saw more tracks in the dirt, large, unmistakable, paw prints that led toward the edge of the meadow. My stomach knotted as I crouched to examine them. "Definitely fresh," I murmured, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. The tracks were headed in the same direction I was going. I straightened, gripping the straps of my backpack tightly. "Okay, Sarah, just stay calm," I said, forcing my breathing to slow. "You've got bear spray. You know what to do." I started, moving again more cautiously this time, my eyes scanning the path ahead. I clapped my hands every few steps, trying to make enough noise to keep any wildlife at bay. The distant sound of trickling water caught my attention, and I spotted a small stream cutting through the meadow. Kneeling by the edge, I splashed some water on my face, letting the coolness wash away some of the tension in my shoulders. "You made it this far," I said, my reflection rippling in the clear water. "Just a little farther to the overlook." I stood and adjusted my pack, ready to continue, but as I turned, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Bushes near the tree line swayed unnaturally, as if something large had brushed against them. My heart thudded painfully as I scanned the area, every nerve in my body on high alert. I reached for the bear spray, my fingers trembling as they closed around the canister. Hey, bear," I shouted, my voice cracking but loud enough to carry. "I'm just passing through." For a moment, everything was still. The only sound was the rush of blood in my ears. Then from deep within the trees I heard a low guttural sound, a sound that sent a jolt of fear straight to my core. It was a huff, followed by the unmistakable snapping of branches. Nope, I muttered, taking slow, deliberate steps backward, keeping my eyes locked on the tree line. The bushes rustled again, and I caught a glimpse of dark fur through the gaps in the foliage. My mouth went dry and my grip on the bear spray tightened. "Hey bear, easy now," I called, my voice steadier this time. "I'm leaving, okay?" The bear didn't emerge, but the rustling stopped. I took that as my cue to move, stepping back onto the trail and putting as much distance as I could between myself and the meadow. My legs felt like lead as I climbed the next incline, every step a battle against the wave of panic threatening to consume me. I focused on my breathing, counting each inhale and exhale to keep myself grounded, When I finally reached the next clearing, I let out a shaky breath and sank onto a flat rock to catch my breath. "That was too close," I whispered, wiping sweat from my brow. I reached for my water bottle, my hands still trembling as I unscrewed the cap. Taking a long sip, I tried to steady myself, but the image of the bear's dark fur lingered in my mind. A sudden crunch of gravel made me whip around, my heart lurching into my throat, but it was only a family of hikers coming up the trail, their voices cheerful and oblivious. "Hi there," the father greeted, nodding as they passed. "Hi," I managed, my voice strained. The mother glanced at me with a curious smile. "You okay?" "Yeah, just saw some bear tracks back there," I said, trying to sound casual. "Oh wow, be careful," she said, her expression shifting to one of concern. "I will," I assured her. As they disappeared down the trail, I took a deep breath and forced myself to stand. There was no turning back now. The wilderness was unpredictable, but I knew the rules. Stay alert, stay respectful, and never let your guard down. With a final glance over my shoulder, I pressed on, the weight of the encounter settling like a stone in my chest. The Highline Trail wasn't just a test of endurance. It was a test of resilience, and I was determined to see it through. The path ahead twisted sharply, the jagged cliffs on my left looming higher than ever. To my right, the valley stretched endlessly, its green expanse broken only by distant patches of snow. The morning's unease clung to me like a second skin, every sound amplified in the unnatural silence of the wilderness. As I rounded the bend, a rustling sound reached my ears, distinct and too deliberate to be the wind. I froze mid-step, my heart pounding in my chest. Slowly, I turned my head toward the source of the noise, my eyes scanning the dense brush lining the trail. And then I saw it. A black bear stood about 20 feet away, its glossy fur glinting in the dappled sunlight. It was massive, easily 400 or 500 pounds, and it was busy stripping berries from a bush. The bear hadn't noticed me yet, but my sudden appearance put us uncomfortably close. My breath caught, and I felt a jolt of adrenaline surge through my veins. I could hear my dad's voice again, firm but calm. "If you see a bear, don't panic, don't run, let it know you're there." I took a slow, steady breath and raised my hands slightly, palms outward. "Hey, bear," I said, my voice trembling but loud enough to carry. "It's just me, I'm passing through, okay?" The bear's head jerked up, its dark eyes locking onto mine. It snorted, its ears flicking back, and I felt the primal, gut-wrenching fear of standing before a creature that could end me in seconds. "Easy now," I said, my voice cracking. "I don't want any trouble." The bear huffed again, its powerful body shifting slightly as it stood on all fours facing me fully. My hand instinctively moved to the canister of bear spray at my belt, but I didn't unclip it yet. I remembered the advice from countless safety briefings. Make yourself look bigger, speak calmly, and don't make sudden movements. "Beautiful day, huh?" I said, forcing an awkward smile. "Lots of berries out here for you?" The bear didn't seem impressed by my attempt at small talk. It took a step forward, and I took a matching step back, my boots crunching softly on the gravel. Okay, I'm leaving," I said, my voice rising slightly. "Just stay right there." I began to back away slowly, keeping my eyes on the bear, but careful not to trip over the uneven trail. My pulse thundered in, my ears and my muscles ached from the tension of holding perfectly still moments before. The bear snorted again, a guttural sound that made my stomach twist. Then in an instant it lowered its head and surged forward, closing the distance between us in a blur of motion. "Shit!" I gasped, yanking the bear spray from my belt. Before I could raise it fully, the bear swiped with one massive paw, and I felt a sharp, searing pain explode in my leg. The impact knocked me sideways, and I hit the ground hard, the breath rushing from my lungs. "Stay back!" I screamed, fumbling to point the canister at the bear. The spray hissed as I pressed the trigger, releasing a cloud of orange mist. The bear jerked its head away, huffing loudly and retreating a few steps. My hands shook violently. As I scrambled to my feet, my injured leg screaming in protest, the bear paced for a moment, shaking its head and snorting as it tried to rid itself of the stinging spray. I took the opportunity to put more distance between us, limping backward as fast as I could manage. "Go on," I shouted, my voice hoarse. "Get out of here!" The bear let out a deep, rumbling growl but didn't advance again. Instead, it turned toward the bushes and began to retreat, its massive frame disappearing into the dense foliage. I stood there, panting, the canister of bear spray still clutched tightly in my hand. My leg throbbed with each beat of my heart, and when I glanced down, I saw a dark stain spreading across my jeans. Blood. "Shit," I muttered, wincing as I gingerly touched the torn fabric. The bear's claws had left deep gashes, and the pain was unlike anything I'd ever felt. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen in shock. The reality of what had just happened was almost too much to process. But then, survival instincts kicked in. "Move, Sarah," I whispered, forcing myself to take a step. The pain was excruciating, but I gritted my teeth and kept going. I had to get back to the trailhead. The trek back felt like an eternity, each step a test of sheer willpower. I used my trekking poles to support myself, leaning heavily on them as I navigated the narrow path. My breaths came in shallow gasps, and my vision blurred with tears. But I couldn't afford to stop. Every rustle in the trees sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the bear charging after me again. When I finally reached a wider section of the trail, I sank onto a flat rock, my body trembling from exhaustion and pain. I fumbled with my pack, pulling out my first aid kit and tearing into the gauze. "Okay," I muttered through gritted teeth. "You've got this." I wrapped the gauze tightly around my leg, wincing as the pressure sent a fresh jolt of pain through me. The makeshift bandage wouldn't hold for long, but it was better than nothing. As I sat there, catching my breath, I heard the distant sound of voices, other hikers coming up the trail. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. "Help!" I called, my voice weak but desperate. "Over here!" A few minutes later, a man and a woman appeared around the bend, their expressions shifting from curiosity to alarm when they saw me. "Oh my God, are you okay?" the woman asked, rushing forward. "I got too close to a bear," I said, my voice shaky. It swiped my leg, but I managed to scare it off. "Let's get you some help," the man said, pulling out his phone. "We'll call the rangers." As they dialed, I leaned back against the rock, my heart finally beginning to slow. The bear was gone, but its presence lingered in the fresh, scars on my leg and the lingering dread in my chest. The wilderness had reminded me, in no uncertain terms, just how small and fragile I was in its vast, untamed expanse. The pain in my leg throbbed with every step, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't let the bear chase me again. The adrenaline still buzzed in my veins, keeping my thoughts scattered, my breathing shallow. But the bleeding from my leg was already slowing down, the makeshift bandage I'd tied on holding steady, and the pain, though sharp, was manageable. I had no choice but to keep moving. The trail ahead seemed endless. Each turn looked like the last. Each step felt like the longest I'd taken. The sky had shifted from bright blue to a pale, washed-out gray, a distant storm brewing somewhere in the mountains. The air was thick and heavy, and with every gust of wind, I feared it would carry the bear's scent back toward me. It had been close. Too close. I didn't dare look over my shoulder, but I could feel the weight of the wilderness pressing down on me. The trees seemed to close in, the underbrush whispering with movement. For a moment, it felt like the forest itself was alive with the threat of the bear, its eyes still watching me, stalking me from the shadows. I tried to focus on my next steps, my hands trembling as I clutched my trekking poles for support. "Just get to the trailhead, Sarah," I muttered under my breath, my voice a fragile thread in the overwhelming silence. "Just get to the damn trailhead." The high-pitched sound of a bird's call broke the tension for a brief moment, but it did little to calm my nerves. My thoughts were a swirl of panic, regret, and pain. I had trained for this, had read every guide, listened to all the bear safety tips, but none of it had prepared me for the raw, gut-wrenching reality of being so close to a creature so wild, so unforgiving. I stopped for a moment to catch my breath, leaning heavily on the poles. The world around me felt muted, as if I were underwater, and I closed my eyes for a brief moment to steady myself. "Don't faint. Don't pass out. But when I opened my eyes again, the world spun in a disorienting swirl of greens and browns. My legs felt weak, my stomach twisting. Get it together. Just as I began to move again, I heard it. A deep, guttural growl from somewhere behind me. I froze. My heart stuttered in my chest as the blood drained from my face. The air seemed to thicken with dread. The bear. Before I could turn around, the ground vibrated beneath me, and the bushes ahead of me shook violently. My breath hitched. The bear. I whipped around just in time to see the enormous dark figure crashing through the underbrush. Oh no! I tried to step back, but my injured leg buckled beneath me. I fell hard to the ground, landing with a sharp thud that rattled my bones. Pain shot up from my leg, but I couldn't afford to focus on it now. The bear was closer. It was coming straight for me. Its massive body was a blur of muscle and fur, its jaws parted in a low snarl. My mind screamed for me to move, to run, but my body wouldn't respond. With a ferocity that seemed to defy everything I knew about nature, the bear lunged at me, its claws swiping through the air like knives. One of those claws raked across my chest, and I gasped as the fabric of my jacket tore, the flesh beneath opening up in a hot, searing line. I screamed, the sound ragged and raw. The bear was on top of me now, its weight pinning me to the ground, and I felt its breath hot against my face. "Get off me!" I managed to choke out, my hands scrambling for the bear spray. The bear snarled, its eyes glinting with primal rage. Its teeth were bared, dripping with saliva. Its massive paw swung again, catching my arm, and I cried out as the impact rattled my bones. Everything was a blur of pain, of terror, and then, just as quickly as it had begun, the bear paused. It hesitated, its nose twitching. The bear seemed to realize something. I'm not a threat. It let out a low growl, stepping back just enough for me to take in a sharp breath, but it didn't retreat completely. My hands shook as I managed to unclip the bear spray, holding it out in front of me with both hands. "Stay back!" I gasped, my voice barely a whisper. The bear's eyes flicked to the canister, its nose twitching again as it realized what it was. I sprayed, and a cloud of orange mist shot out toward its face. The bear reared back, its massive body jerking in surprise, and it swiped at its face. For a second, I thought it was retreating, but then it surged forward again, more enraged than before. I pressed the trigger again, and the spray shot into the bear's eyes. It let out a deafening growl, stumbling back and shaking its head. Violently, but it didn't charge again. Its eyes were wild, its fur standing on end as it turned and bolted into the trees, crashing through the brush like a freight train. I didn't move, I couldn't. My chest rose and fell in rapid succession, my breaths coming in ragged gasps. My leg was burning with pain, and my arms trembled from the effort of holding the bear spray. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, the world spinning as I tried to process what had just happened. I had almost died. I had been inches away from the jaws of that bear. The realization hit me like a wave, and tears sprang to my eyes. But I forced myself to stay focused. I had to get out of there. With shaky hands, I fumbled for my phone, praying that it hadn't fallen out of my pocket during the chaos. My fingers trembled as I pulled it free and unlocked the screen. "Help, please," I whispered, dialing the nearest ranger station. The signal barely registered, but after several attempts, the line clicked through. "Ranger station, how can I help you?" I've been attacked by a bear," I managed to say, my voice weak. "I'm on the Highline Trail. Please, I need help." "We've got a team on the way. Stay where you are," the voice on the other end said. "Help is on the way. Just hold on." I collapsed back against the ground, my chest heaving with exhaustion and fear. My leg throbbed, my arm ached, and the wound on my chest burned, but at least I was alive. For now, that had to be enough. The seconds felt like hours as I lay on the cold, hard ground, my body still shaking from the bear's attack. I could hear nothing but my ragged breaths and the pounding of my heart, which felt like it might burst out of my chest. My eyes darted toward the trees where the bear had retreated, the area now eerily silent. "Stay calm, stay calm." The words played in a loop inside my mind, though I wasn't sure if I believed them anymore. I could still feel the bear's weight on top of me, its claws digging into my flesh, the sickening growl reverberating through my bones. I knew I had been lucky, but how much luck could I push before it ran out? I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing myself to take steady breaths. My chest felt tight, like it was too small to hold the panic, the fear that still gripped my body. Slowly I shifted my weight, testing the pain in my leg. The gash was still there, the blood staining the torn fabric of my jeans. My hands shook as I gingerly touched it, wincing at the sharp sting. It was swollen now, and though I'd tied it off the best I could, the blood was seeping through the makeshift bandage. No time to think about that. I could still hear the faint rustle of leaves behind me. I had to move. The bear had given me a break, but I wasn't sure how long that would last. It could come back at any moment, and I didn't want to be caught, unprepared again. Grabbing my trekking poles, I pushed myself into a sitting position, biting back a cry of pain. I took a moment to steady myself, my eyes scanning the trail ahead. The trailhead was still a good distance away, but it was the only place where I could get help. I had to make it there. Just a little farther, I whispered, as if saying it out loud would make it more possible. I pressed my hand to my injured leg, the pain sharp and unrelenting. My vision blurred for a second, and I had to steady myself again. Focus, Sarah. Focus. I rose slowly, using the poles to support myself as I stood. My leg screamed in protest, but I gritted my teeth and took a tentative step forward. The trail was narrow, barely wide enough for two people to pass, and the steep drop on one side made every step feel like a risky decision. The wind had picked up, and the trees whispered ominously around me. I paused, listening for any sign. Of movement behind me. The bear could be lurking just out of sight, waiting for me to let my guard down again. "Keep moving," I muttered, setting one foot in front of the other. "Keep moving." My pace was slow, each step deliberate, but it was all I could manage. My leg felt heavy, like it didn't belong to me anymore. The weight of my own body, dragging it down. Sweat trickled down my forehead, mixing with the grime of dirt and blood, but I pushed through. I couldn't afford to stop. Halfway down the trail, I reached a small outcrop of rocks. I paused for a moment, looking around nervously. My breath came in short gasps, but there was no sign of the bear. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. That's when I heard it. A low, distant growl, barely perceptible beneath the rush of the wind. My heart stopped. No, I spun around, my eyes scanning the woods behind me. The bear, was it following me again? "Please, no," I whispered under my breath, the words barely leaving my lips. The growl came again, louder this time. It was closer. I forced my legs to move, desperation fueling my every step. My heart thundered in my chest as I quickened my pace, the pounding of my blood so loud in my ears I could barely hear anything else. I couldn't run, I couldn't outrun a bear, but I had to get away. The growl came again, and this time I knew. The bear was closing in. Panic surged through me and I stumbled forward, my legs nearly giving out beneath me. I couldn't fall. Not now. The edge of the trail was coming up, a sharp turn where the path split. If I could just make it there, maybe I'd have a chance to lose the bear, to find a better vantage point, but every step was agony. "Please," I muttered. "Please, just a little longer." I reached the split in the trail, and in my panic I didn't even hesitate. I turned sharply, heading toward a thicker area of trees. If I could get some cover, I could figure out what to do. But the moment I turned, I heard it, crashing through the brush behind me. The bear wasn't far now. I sprinted, my legs burning. With each frantic stride, pushing through branches and low-hanging leaves. My injured leg screamed in protest, and I nearly lost my footing, but I forced myself forward. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep going like this, but I couldn't. Stop! There was a small creek up ahead, and I remembered from my map that there was a bridge crossing it not far from here. If I could just get there. I broke through the trees and saw the creek ahead, the rushing water a welcome sound. I didn't hesitate this time. I plunged into the shallow water, slipping on the wet rocks as I tried to make my way across. The cold of the water was a shock to my system, but it only gave me a fleeting moment of clarity. As I reached the other side, I glanced back, and that's when I saw it. The bear. It was at the edge of the creek, its massive body emerging. from the trees, but it didn't follow me across. It stopped on the other side, its nose twitching in the air. For a moment I just stood there, breathless, staring at the creature. It was close, too close, but it was staring at me with those wild dark eyes assessing me from across the water. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the bear turned away. It didn't charge, it didn't advance, it simply moved back into the trees, disappearing into the wilderness from which it came. I stood there, stunned, my heart racing as I watched it disappear. The world felt too quiet, too still. The bear was gone for now. I dropped to my knees, the exhaustion and pain finally catching up with me. My hands shook as I pressed them into the dirt, grounding myself for just a moment. I was alive, but for how much longer? I had to keep moving. The sun was beginning its descent, casting a faint orange glow across the mountains, but I couldn't afford to admire the view. My legs were screaming with each step, and my injured leg burned with every movement. I had lost track of time. How long had it been since I'd been attacked? Hours? Days? It felt like a lifetime, but I knew one thing. I had to make it to the trailhead. Just a little further, Sarah. You've made it this far. Don't stop now. The thought of the bear still lingered, a dark cloud that followed me through the woods. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made my heart lurch in my chest. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the creature emerge from the trees at any moment. I had crossed the creek. I'd put distance between myself and the bear, but the wilderness was vast, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me, waiting for me to slip up. Every step felt like a battle. My body was exhausted, the physical and emotional toll of the day wearing me down. I had no idea how much longer I could keep this up, but I knew I couldn't give up now. The trail was quieter now. The chatter of wildlife had faded, and all I could hear was the rhythmic crunch of my boots on the gravel. My breathing was ragged, my chest heaving with each labored breath. The pain in my leg had settled into a dull throb, a constant reminder of what had happened. It wasn't just the physical pain that weighed me down. It was the realization that I had been so close to losing everything. The bear had nearly killed me. I shook my head, trying to clear the thoughts. The trailhead was still ahead. I had to make it. Another few minutes passed, and I rounded a bend in the trail. I could see it in the distance, Logan Pass, where my car was parked. The relief that flooded through me was overwhelming. I'm almost there, just keep going. But the moment I saw the trailhead, a wave of dizziness hit me and I staggered to a halt. My legs felt like rubber, my vision blurred, and I had to brace myself against a nearby rock to keep from falling. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to steady my breathing. I couldn't pass out here, not now. You're almost there, Sarah, I whispered to myself, the words barely leaving my lips. Just hold on a little longer. But then out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. Movement. I whipped my head around, my heart hammering in my chest. The trees were still and quiet, but I knew better than to think it was safe. Is it the bear? I stood frozen, my eyes darting around trying to spot whatever it was that had caught my attention. But after a few long seconds, I realized it was nothing, a shadow of a branch swaying in the wind. I exhaled sharply, feeling the tension drain from my body. It's nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. Every rustle, every shifting shadow seemed amplified in my mind, a reminder of how close I had come to death. I forced myself to take another step forward, then another. Each movement felt like a victory, no matter how small. The trailhead was within reach, but I was beginning to wonder if I could make it without collapsing. The dizziness returned. The pain in my leg flared again, sharper than before. I stumbled forward, barely able to keep my balance. My body was on the verge of giving out, but I couldn't stop now. I couldn't. Help! I managed to scream the word, the sound weak but desperate. Help! Please! I looked up and saw a figure ahead, just outside the trailhead. A man in hiking gear was standing by the parking lot, looking in my direction. Hey, are you all right? He shouted, hurrying toward me. Help me! I whispered, my voice barely a breath. He reached me just as my legs buckled beneath me. I collapsed into his arms, my body unable to hold itself up any longer. Whoa, easy there, the man said, his voice tinged with alarm. What happened? Are you hurt? I was attacked, I breathed, my voice ragged. By a bear. Please. I need help. The man's eyes widened as he saw the blood on my leg, the gash on my chest. He swore under his breath, then pulled out his phone. I'm calling for help, he said quickly, his voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. Just stay with me. You're gonna be okay. I don't know if I can... My words trailed off. As exhaustion flooded my body, I felt lightheaded, my vision swimming. Don't you dare pass out on me, he said firmly, his hands on my shoulders as he helped me sit up against a nearby rock. Help is on the way. Just stay with me, all right? I nodded weakly, my mind too tired to process much else. All I could focus on was the fact that I was here, that I was safe, at least for now. I don't think I can walk anymore, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You don't need to, the man replied. You've made it. You're at the trailhead. They'll be here soon. I leaned back against the rock, my head spinning as the pain in my leg intensified. I couldn't stop shaking. The man stayed by my side, speaking to me in a calm, reassuring voice, though his gaze kept flicking to the distance. The park rangers were on their way, he told me. Help was coming. Thank you, I whispered, the words thick with gratitude. Hang in there, he said. Help's almost here. You did good. I closed my eyes, too tired to keep them open. The world around me felt distant, muffled. The bear attack, the chase, the terror, it all felt like it was happening to someone else. But I had survived. I had made it. The sound of sirens was the first thing I noticed. Faint at first, then growing louder as they neared. The distant rush of vehicles echoed through the mountains, a welcome sound that filled me with a strange mix of relief and dread. My vision was still blurry, the world around me slightly out of focus, but I could tell that help was near. I leaned back against the rock, my eyes half closed, the exhaustion from the day finally catching up with me. The pain in my leg was constant, a dull ache that seemed to pulse with each beat of my heart, but the worst of it was the emptiness, the raw, primal fear that I couldn't quite shake. The memory of the bear's claws raking through my flesh, the growl that had vibrated through my body like a warning, lingered like a shadow in my mind. But I was here. I had made it. You're gonna be all right, the man who had helped me said again, though his voice wasn't as steady as before. His gaze kept flicking nervously toward the trail. Help is coming, just hold on. I can't believe I made it this far, I muttered, barely able to keep my eyes open. I thought I was done for. You're stronger than you. Think, he said, giving me a small, reassuring smile. You fought your way out of there. I'm just glad I was around when you needed it. I nodded weakly, too tired to say anything else. My thoughts were slipping in and out of focus, but I could hear the sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel, and then voices, shouted words from people who were too far away for me to make out. Then, suddenly, the rangers appeared. There were two of them at first, one tall with short cropped hair and a stern expression, and the other shorter with a round face and a gentle smile. Both were dressed in the standard park ranger uniforms, and the sight of them made a flood of relief rush through me. They were here. Finally. Hey, you're safe now, the shorter ranger said, as he crouched down beside me, his face creased with concern. What happened? Are you hurt? I was attacked by a bear, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how I got away. I thought... I broke off, the weight of it all crashing down on me again. The tall ranger knelt beside the other, assessing my injuries. She's been through a lot, he said, his voice calm but serious. Let's get her checked out first, then we'll figure out how to get her to medical attention. The other ranger nodded and began checking my leg, carefully pulling away the makeshift bandage I had wrapped around it. His fingers were gentle as he examined the gash. You're lucky this isn't worse than it is, he said, glancing up at me. That's a deep wound, but it doesn't look like it's hit any major arteries. We'll need to get you to a clinic for stitches, but it's not life-threatening. I let out a shaky breath, still in shock, but grateful for the reassurance. Thank you, I whispered. The taller ranger spoke again, his voice filled with a quiet authority. We're going to have to get you out of here, Miss Carter. It's a long way to the nearest medical facility, but we've got a stretcher. And we're going to take care of you. Will the bear be back? I asked, my voice barely audible. The shorter ranger exchanged a glance with his partner, and I saw a flicker of concern in his eyes. It's unlikely, he said. But we'll have a team combing the area just in case. You don't need to worry about that now, we've got you. I nodded, grateful for their calm demeanor. Despite the horror of the situation, their presence was a comfort. They knew what they were doing. The taller ranger turned to the man, who had found me. Can you help us get her onto the stretcher? We'll need you to hold her steady while we secure her. The man nodded quickly, stepping in to help. He was surprisingly strong for his apparent age, and together, the three of them gently lifted me onto the stretcher. The pain in my leg flared up again, but I gritted my teeth, trying not to cry out. We've got her, the shorter ranger said as they adjusted the straps to keep me steady. You're safe now, Miss Carter, just hang on. I could barely nod, my body feeling like it was sinking into the stretcher, too tired to hold myself up. The world around me seemed to blur again, the sound of the rangers' voices fading as the pain and exhaustion took over. As they began to move me down the trail, the landscape around me seemed to shift. The towering trees blurred into an unrecognizable haze, and I had to close my eyes for a moment to steady myself. My thoughts were muddled, and all I could focus on was the feeling of the stretcher beneath me, the hum of voices around me, and the slow, rhythmic motion as I was carried toward safety. Almost there, the tall ranger said, his voice gentle but firm. Just a little farther. I didn't respond, too tired to speak, but I could feel the difference in the air as we neared the trailhead. The scent of the forest was replaced by the sharp, sterile scent of the parking lot. The distant sound of vehicles became clearer. Stay with us, Sarah, the man who had helped me earlier said. You're doing great. Just a little bit more. I nodded faintly, but I couldn't keep my eyes open any longer. The exhaustion, the fear, the pain, it was all too much. I let go, letting the darkness close in as I finally allowed myself to rest. When I woke again, I was in the back of an ambulance, the soft hum of medical equipment filling the air. The rangers were gone, but the man who had helped me was still with me, sitting beside me in the back of the vehicle. You're going to be all right, he said, offering me a reassuring smile. You're safe now. I looked around, trying to make sense of everything. My chest felt heavy, the weight of what I'd gone through still pressing down on me. But I knew I was alive, I was still here. And for the first time in what felt like days, I allowed myself to believe it. The sterile scent of antiseptic hit me the moment I stepped into the small clinic, mingling with the sharp tang of rubber gloves and the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. My body felt heavy, like it belonged to someone else, as I was, helped from the ambulance and carefully wheeled into an examination room. The pain in my leg had dulled to a constant throb, but it was the exhaustion that weighed me down most. I couldn't seem to stop trembling, the shock of everything still too fresh. The moment the door opened, a woman in scrubs appeared, her face framed by short dark hair. She took one look at me and immediately started moving toward me, her demeanor calm but purposeful. You're in good hands now, she said, her voice warm but practical. We're going to take care of you. Let's get you settled and we'll start by cleaning those wounds. I nodded weakly, my mind still foggy as I tried to process everything. The memories of the bear, the chase, the clawing pain, it was all there just beneath the surface, waiting to break free. But for now I focused on the woman's voice, her presence anchoring me to the reality that I was, in fact, still alive. She guided me to a gurney, and I settled onto it with a soft gasp, the movement sending waves of pain through my body. She quickly unstrapped my leg and started peeling away the bandage I had fashioned in the forest. Whew, she said under her breath as she examined the gash. This is definitely a serious one, but it looks like you avoided any major arteries. We'll get you stitched up, but it's not as bad as it could have been. I felt a small rush of relief at her words, though the pain in my chest seemed to tighten all over again. It hurts, I whispered, my voice trembling. It really hurts. I know, she said, her hands gentle but sure as she cleaned the wound. But we're going to numb it before we stitch you up, all right? You're going to feel a little sting when I inject the anesthetic, but after that, We'll get you taken care of." I nodded, trying to relax as she worked. The sting of the antiseptic was sharp, but it was nothing compared to what I had felt in the woods. I closed my eyes and tried to block out the memories, focusing instead on the rhythmic sound of the nurse's breathing and the soft click of instruments as she prepared the area for the stitches. "You did good out there," she said, her voice cutting through the fog of my thoughts. "You kept your head together, used your bear spray and made it out. That's no small feat." I let out a soft laugh, though it was weak and shaky. I didn't feel so good when I was running away. She smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Adrenaline does strange things to you. You did what you needed to do. That's what matters." As she began to inject the anesthetic into my leg, I couldn't help but flinch, the sting sharp and cold. But soon enough, the area began to go numb, and I could breathe a little easier. "All right, Sarah," the nurse said, her hands steady as she began stitching up the wound. "I'm going to get this stitched up quickly. You just hang in there. For a little bit longer." I barely nodded, too tired to respond. Instead, I closed my eyes again, listening to the soft hum of the machines around me and the rhythmic sound of the nurse's movements as she worked. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke again. "All done. You're stitched up and the wound's cleaned. We'll keep an eye on you for a while to make sure everything's healing properly, but I think you're going to be okay." I blinked, still too exhausted to fully process her words. "Really? It's over?" The nurse gave me a soft smile. "It's over for now. You're going to need to rest, but I think you've made it through the worst of it." I breathed a sigh of relief, though my body still trembled from the aftershock of the attack. She adjusted the bandages on my leg and then helped me sit up. "You're strong, Sarah," she said, her tone soft but firm. "But don't be too hard on yourself. What you went through today was terrifying, and you've got every right to be shaken up. Just take it one step at a time." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. I didn't know if I was going to make it out. "Most people wouldn't have," she replied, "but you kept going. You didn't stop." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling deep within me. I hadn't stopped. I'd kept going, even when I didn't think I could. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice quieter than before. "Well, you'll need to stay overnight for observation. We'll monitor your vital signs, make sure the wound doesn't get infected, and give you some pain relief. After that, we'll talk about follow-up care, but I don't anticipate any complications." She adjusted my blanket and gave me another reassuring smile. "You've been through a lot, but you're going to be okay." I nodded again, feeling the exhaustion settle back into my bones. My body ached, but it was a familiar pain now, one that reminded me of how far I had come. As the nurse moved to prepare a few more supplies, I heard a knock on the door. The tall ranger from earlier stepped in, followed by a man I didn't immediately recognize. He was older, with a grizzled face and dark eyes that seemed to be constantly scanning the room. "Sarah Carter?" the older man asked, his voice deep but friendly. "That's me," I said, sitting up a little straighter despite the lingering pain in my leg. "I'm Ranger Harris," he said, offering me a small nod. "I'm with the Park Service. We've got a report about the bear attack. We're following up on the incident, just making sure everything's handled properly." I nodded, my throat tight, as I tried to make sense of everything that had happened. "I'm okay now," I said softly. "I made it out." "I'm glad to hear that," Ranger Harris said, his eyes softening just a touch. "I know it's been a long day for you. We'll be in touch with more details soon, but for now, focus on resting. You've earned it." He turned to leave, but before the door closed, he glanced back at me. "And Sarah, you did good." The door clicked shut behind him, and I was left alone with my thoughts. I was alive. That was all that mattered, wasn't it? But the images of the bear, of the pain, of the terror I had felt, they wouldn't leave me anytime soon. Still, for now, I allowed myself to rest, to take solace in the fact that I had survived. And somehow, that felt like enough for tonight. The day had passed in a haze of painkillers, blankets, and the soft whir of medical equipment. The pain had subsided to a dull throb, but the emotional weight of everything I'd endured was still heavy on my chest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the bear's dark, wild eyes staring back at me. I could still hear its growls, its claws scraping the earth, its breath hot and ragged in my ears. I hadn't realized how much the terror had drained me until the evening, when the quiet hum of the clinic made it clear just how exhausted I truly was. But I couldn't sleep. Not yet. I needed something to ground me, something to take me away from the whirlwind of thoughts that kept crashing into my mind. That's when the nurse returned, her steps soft but purposeful. "Hey there," she said, her smile warm as she entered the room. "How are you feeling?" "I'm okay," I replied, though my voice cracked slightly. I hadn't really been okay for hours, but I didn't want to admit that. "A little tired, but I think I'm starting to process everything." She nodded. "It's a lot to take in, but you're safe now, and that's what matters." "I know," I said, glancing down at the bandages wrapped around my leg. "But I keep thinking about what happened. I can't shake the image of it, the bear, how close I was to—" I trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "Survival instincts are powerful," the nurse said gently. "You did what you had to do. You survived when most people wouldn't have." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel proud of myself, but there was a lingering doubt. What if I hadn't reacted fast enough? What if I had been too slow to defend myself? She seemed to sense my unease. "You're going to be okay, Sarah, but if you need to talk about it, there's someone here who can help." I looked up at her, my eyebrows furrowed. "Talk about what?" "Your experience," she explained. "We have a local blog where people share their stories, hikers, campers, anyone who's been through something like this. It's not for everyone, but some people find it helpful to share what they've been through." I sat back against the pillows, contemplating her offer. "I don't know if I'm ready to share it yet." "You don't have to decide right now," she said, "but when you are, the blog's a place where people can find support. You're not alone in this." I nodded, not sure what to think. Sharing my story with strangers felt strange, but then again, maybe it would help. Maybe it would make the experience feel real, give it meaning instead of just haunting me. Before I could voice any more doubts, the nurse smiled warmly and patted my shoulder. "You just focus on getting better. The rest will come when you're ready." As she left the room, I was left to my thoughts once again. The room was quiet except for the occasional beep of the machines monitoring my vitals. It was the kind of silence that weighed heavily on you. My phone, which had been tucked away on the table beside me, vibrated suddenly, snapping me from my reverie. I grabbed it, surprised to see a message from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, is this Sarah? I'm Emily. I write for the Glacier National Park blog. I heard about what happened to you. If you're comfortable, I'd love to hear your story and feature it in our next post. I know it could help others." I stared at the message for a moment, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Sharing my experience felt like opening a wound, but Emily was right. My story could help someone else. It could give them the strength to keep going, to push through their own fears. After a long pause, I typed back, "Hi, Emily. This is Sarah. I'm still processing everything, but I think sharing might be helpful. Let me know what you need from me." I hit send and set the phone down beside me. The decision had been made, and I knew that sharing my story, even in a small way, might be the first step in healing. A few minutes later, Emily responded. "Thank you, Sarah. Whenever you're ready, just let me know. I can send over a few questions, or we can just talk if you'd prefer. No rush." I smiled softly, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Later that evening, after a light dinner and a brief visit from the attending doctor, I received another message from Emily, this time with a few questions about the attack. She had asked me to recount what happened, how I felt during the encounter, what I had learned about myself, and if I had any advice for others who might find themselves in similar situations. At first, I hesitated. The memories were still fresh, the fear too real to put into words. But then I remembered the nurse's words, that sharing could help, and I began to type. I was hiking alone, just a few hours into the Highline Trail. I've hiked this trail before, but I had never felt this kind of fear. When I came across the bear, I didn't know what to do. It was so much bigger than I expected, so powerful and wild. I froze at first, but then it moved toward me. I grabbed my bear spray and kept backing away. I made noise, I talked to it, tried to keep calm. But when it charged, I didn't know if I could survive. The pain when it swiped at me, it was indescribable. But somehow I kept moving, I didn't stop. Even when I thought I couldn't take another step, I kept going. I paused for a moment, rereading the words I had written. The memory of the bear, the terror in its eyes, still felt too vivid, too bear. But this was my reality. I had survived it. What I learned from this, I guess, it's that we're all stronger than we think. The wilderness is unpredictable, and we can't control everything, but we can control how we react. I didn't. Stop. That's the most important thing. I hit send, my fingers trembling slightly as I let go of the words. A few moments later, Emily replied, "Thank you for sharing, Sarah. I know this will resonate with a lot of people. Your story will be up on the blog tomorrow, and I'm sure it will help someone who's going through something similar." I leaned back against the pillow, feeling a sense of finality wash over me. I had shared my experience, and though it didn't erase the fear or the pain, it felt like a step toward healing, a step toward letting go of the terror, the uncertainty, and the darkness that had followed me since that day on the trail. Maybe, just maybe, I was ready to move forward. The days that followed felt like a blur. Time seemed to stretch and collapse in on itself, the moments of my recovery interspersed with the haunting memories of the bear's attack. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw the same image. The bear, massive and wild, its eyes locking onto mine with an unsettling calm. The sound of its growl still reverberated in my chest, a reminder of how close I had come to being its prey. But the worst part, the part I wasn't prepared for, was the silence that followed. After the chaos of the attack, the pain, the constant movement, it all stopped and I was left alone with the memory. It was louder than anything else. It was the scars, both physical and emotional, that followed me long after the doctor had stitched me up and the nurses had done their part. I sat on the edge of my bed in the small clinic room, staring at my leg. The bandages had been replaced with a lighter dressing now, and I could see the scar from the bear's swipe, jagged and raw. The skin around it was a dark purple, swollen and tender to the touch, but the stitches were holding up. The scar, though, would remain. It would always be there as a reminder of what happened. A knock at the door broke my reverie, and I turned to see the nurse from earlier entering the room. She smiled at me, though her eyes held the familiar concern. "How's the leg feeling today?" she asked as she approached. "Better," I said quietly, forcing a smile. "Still hurts, but it's getting there." She nodded and moved to check my bandages. "That's good. We're keeping an eye on it, but I think you're on the right track. How are you holding up otherwise?" I hesitated. I hadn't really talked about how I was feeling. The physical pain had been easy to measure, swelling, bruising, the difficulty of walking, but the emotional side was different. It wasn't something I could easily put into words. "I don't know," I said slowly, unsure how to voice. It's hard. Every time I think I'm getting past it, it comes back. The fear, the sound of its growl." I swallowed, feeling the tightness in my throat. "I keep seeing its eyes." The nurse's face softened. She put a hand on my shoulder. "I understand you've been through something truly traumatic. It's normal to have those thoughts, those flashbacks. It's your mind's way of processing it. But you're still here, Sarah. You survived." "I don't feel strong," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "You are stronger than you think," she replied gently. "You fought your way through something that most people wouldn't have made it through. You kept moving. That's strength." I nodded, but the weight of her words didn't immediately sink in. I still didn't feel like myself. The fear was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. It wasn't something that would go away overnight. The nurse began to rewrap my bandage carefully, her movements soothing in their precision. "You're not alone in this, Sarah," she said quietly. "There are resources, counseling if you ever want it. You don't have to carry this by yourself." I nodded again, but the thought of talking to someone, reliving the attack, made my stomach churn. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. As she finished securing the bandages, she gave me a final reassuring smile. Remember, healing takes time, physically and emotionally. Don't rush it. You've already made it farther than you think. I watched her leave, her words settling in the silence of the room. I wasn't sure if I believed her, but I wanted to. I wanted to feel like I was healing, like I was whole again. But there was still so much left to process. The fear, the panic, the terror of the bear's attack. And then there was the shame that lingered, unspoken, a quiet voice in the back of my mind that asked, what if I hadn't reacted fast enough? What if I had frozen? What if I hadn't survived? That voice wouldn't go away no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. Later that evening, I was sitting on the bed, staring out the window at the fading light, when my phone buzzed. I picked it up, seeing a text from Emily, the journalist from the Glacier National Park blog. Hi Sarah, I just wanted to thank you again for sharing your story. It's live on the blog now. I think it's going to help a lot of people. You're incredibly brave. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the screen. I hadn't checked the blog post yet. It felt too personal, too raw to read. But Emily was right, it was out there now, my story, my experience. Maybe, just maybe, it would help someone else who had been through something similar. I opened the link. The post was titled, A Survivor's Tale, How Sarah Carter Faced the Bear of Glacier National Park. As I read through the words, the details of the encounter, the description of the fear I had felt, my hands began to tremble. The article painted a picture of me as this strong, brave survivor, and while part of me was grateful that I could help others, another part of me felt like an imposter. I wasn't strong, I was just lucky. But as I read through the responses, the comments from strangers who had found comfort in my story, I began to feel something shift deep within me. Thank you for sharing. I had a similar encounter in the Rockies last year. Your story gave me the strength to keep going. Sarah, you're an inspiration. I froze when I came across a bear once, but reading your story makes me believe I could survive it next time. Tears welled up in my eyes unbidden. These were strangers, people I'd never met, yet their words, their gratitude moved something inside me. Maybe I hadn't been so weak after all. Maybe surviving the attack wasn't just about running or fighting. Maybe it was about continuing, even when everything inside me screamed to stop. I put the phone down, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. A knock at the door startled me, and I quickly wiped away the last of my tears. When I opened it, the man who had found me on the trail, the one who had helped me get to the trailhead, was standing there, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. You look like you could use these, he said with a sheepish smile. I smiled back, surprised but grateful. Thank you, that's very kind of you. I just wanted to check on you, he said softly. Make sure you're doing okay. I'm getting there, I said, glancing down at the flowers. It's been hard, but I think I'm starting to see that maybe I'm not as broken as I thought I was. He stepped into the room, holding out the flowers to me. You're not broken, Sarah. You're stronger than you know. I took the flowers from him, feeling the softness of the petals against my fingers. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this. I didn't have all the answers, and I wasn't sure when the fear would completely fade. But maybe it wasn't about being free from fear. Maybe it was about finding the strength to keep moving forward despite it. I smiled at him, a genuine smile, and felt a small but real sense of hope. I think I'm going to be okay, I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. I'm going to be okay.